Indie Week at apox.net. Kinda. Starting today, I wanted to focus more on the independent, and by independent I mean labels you are probably never going to hear of, and the bands that you are probably never going to hear of. Some bands that I never heard of had gotten in touch with me recently and sent me some promos, physical, digital ones, and they asked me for my opinion. I've put it off until this week hit, because I was planning on this for a little while. And the first one I wanted to tackle was Dreariness, and the album called My Mind Is Too Weak to Forget. This is a shoegaze depressive black metal band from Italy. Rome, Italy. I just wanted to make sure I got that right. They formed last year. They have this brand new album coming out, and the length actually goes over an hour. They're a three-piece, and I gotta check my notes here. It's Gris, who handles guitar, keyboard, and bass, Torpor, who handles drums, and Tenebra on vocals. And Gris and Torpor are both from Misere Nobis fame. That band, another Rome, Italy metal band. I've personally never heard it, but I don't know. This album was released in January, and it's through Nostalgic Productions. It's 8 songs, and it totals an hour and 2 minutes in length. The production on this is actually surprisingly modern and digital. The guitars are really sharp in distortion, as well as the pitch. The bass was more of a mid-range. I had to crank up the bass for it to make any real impact to it, but the only time it really makes any major impact is when it goes into the shoegaze, more emotional riffs, which are actually, at the very start, they're not that plenty. They're not that bountiful, however you want to put it. The cymbals are pristine. They are a bit pushed back into the mix. The snares, they range from hollow to tight. Bass kicks have a nice click with them. But the thing that I really liked was the echo on them, because it really did help to give the album more of a haunting feel. Mostly because of this fact. The vocals have no effect on them whatsoever, and they dwarf out everything. They don't drown anything out, but they just... the volume level of the vocals compared to everything else. It can be pretty rough. It can be pretty painful to listen to, and they can sound strained at times. They are an insanely high-pitched shriek, which is kind of common for the depressive black metal style, but usually what bands will do is push them into the background so it sounds like a haunting scream in the background, like being carried by the wind. Not this one. It's right there in your face. And honestly, it sounds painful until you realize the vocalist is female. Then it makes sense. Then it's a little more tolerable. I didn't know this going in. As a matter of fact, I hated this going in. I really did not like this album at first, just because of those vocals. And that's sad, because after I found out that that there was a female in the group, that it was the vocalist, I actually enjoyed it a lot more. I understood how high-pitched she can go. It's not just some guy screaming his head off, straining to reach that higher falsetto-style scream, that shriek. This is actually a female screaming her head off with that shriek, and it adds credibility to a lot of the lyrical concepts. Reminiscence is the introduction of the album, and it's an instrumental. It's a rather short song. It starts with some stormy weather, and that actually sounds pretty good. It's got some haunting, cold, depressive riffs to it as well towards the end, and this is one thing that bothered me about it. It just kind of ends abruptly. There's no real reason for it to just stop. It doesn't bleed into the next song, Coming Home. It just ends abruptly, and Coming Home actually sounds like it starts a few seconds in from where it's supposed to start. It just slams right in without warning. The high-pitched shrieks. This is why I originally didn't like the album until I found out this was a female vocalist. Oh my god! Even for a female, it sounds like she's straining to reach that pitch. Like she's straining to get these screams out. She's doing it with such enthusiasm. Her voice is just constantly cracking. The music is simple and catchy. I really enjoyed it for what it was. There's a good deal of melody to some of the riffs in here. Definitely not catering to the shoegaze aspect, more to the depressive metal element of their sound. There's a slight somber atmosphere. It's a very enthusiastic start to the album, but again, the vocals in this track alone will definitely put you off a bit. You more than likely will have to turn the volume down. I had to turn mine down somewhat compared to what I usually listen to the albums at, and yeah, it still kind of pierced my ears a bit, but they get better as the album goes along. Madness has an acoustic introduction that's about 2 minutes. It's very cold. This one grabs the shoegaze-style riffs again, and it gives it more of an Italian root to it. Like, you can sense the band's Italian roots. Shortly after it starts, it's just emotionally heart-wrenching. It's just that depressing and saddening. The vocals, this is where things usually get better with them. They actually sound tortured. You, in a way, feel bad for the vocalist, just because it seems like she's screaming her head off in mortal agony, that she's tortured, that it's like the voice in the wind without it being in the wind. It sounds fantastic. It's got some stronger drumming, some tighter riffs. The whole song overall is just mid-tempo, but it has a richer output compared to some of the other songs, especially the first track, especially Coming Home. That one had a little bit of a thinner sound to it. There are some slower sections in the track, and they sound very melancholic. There's some additional crying and screaming, and that's another aspect of this album that crops up here and there. There's crying, there's some screaming that is distant, that is in the background. There's some dialogue that'll appear that just randomly is crying and then starts screaming! And it really does lend more credibility to the atmosphere and the environment that the band is going for. The whole thing, it honestly just sounds great, and most of the time I'm watching it, I'm getting like this black and white old film reel of just visuals going through my head of the band themselves performing, the vocalists in pain and screaming. I mean, that's actually very rare for me, that I get a visual like that is so strong. This track is easily one of the most impressive. It's also one of the smoothest that you will find on the album. It flows easily from start to finish, and I said the album does get better as it goes along, especially the vocals, and it does. This is where the album does start getting a lot better. The next track is called Lost, and it's a slower-paced track. Very shoegaze inspired, but it does have some blackened riffs. Like, there are more traditional black metal elements at work along with the shoegaze riffs that gives it a very sinister and depressing touch. This one is another one that really just builds up the atmosphere, especially from the drumming. It gets really aggressive in some of the faster areas, and it helps give it more of a venomous touch at times. So you would have a sinister and a venomous aspect going on. The sharpness of the guitars really works with that atmosphere. There are some additional effects on the vocals, finally, more than any other song had, and it sounded great. The track itself lasts 6.5 minutes. It's one of the shortest lengths next to the introduction, but it really causes a tighter performance. And that's one thing that I noticed about some of the shorter tracks. The performances become tighter, the songs flow a lot smoother, and they're just a lot more enjoyable. It doesn't feel drug along. Like, the band's not trying to drag the song out just for the sake of time. That's not something you find a lot on this album, but there are areas in some songs where you're like, okay, I get the point, move on, and then maybe like 10-20 seconds later they do move on. So it's not like you're going to be sitting here bored in pain through many of the songs. One Last Wish is... Again, I kind of wish this instrumental was not the second to last track, but the last track. I really do. It's a very somber, relaxing performance. It's got a slower start, picks up about halfway through. Not that emotional a track, really. It's just very soothing in a way. Again, it is somber, but you could just kick back and enjoy it. There's nothing really that aggressive. It's a little cold. That's about it. Doesn't really set up much of an atmosphere, especially for the conclusionary track, which is the title track, My Mind Is Too Weak to Forget. Starts off with some dialogue and one of the most impressive screams that this album has to offer. It's a slower, melancholic track. Honestly, had the bass and the guitar distortion been deeper, this would have made one crushing as hell doom metal song. Doom and death metal. There's regular shouting, but honestly, there are times where she just screams and shrieks like a beast. I had to look around, like, is there some TV on with, I don't know, Lord of the Rings going? Where is this shriek coming from all of a sudden? I gotta say, it really just was fantastic, and it does happen every once in a while in the song. I don't know if it was a distortion or what, but I really liked it. It's actually a very moving song. The guitar work does feed in some shoegaze here and there. It has some emotional songs, or emotional parts to it, that really make the song somewhat moving. But unfortunately for this song, there's just nothing that really stands out. It's a good song by all definition. There's no filler, it doesn't drag along, it does, again, move smoothly from start to finish. That's just for a conclusionary track, especially the title track, is just not that impressive. I don't know. It's a good song, I'd still recommend it, but overall, it could definitely use a little more. I don't really know what to say. This is not a typical shoegaze or depressive black metal album, but there's not a lot really going for it as far as emotion goes. It sounds somewhat typical, but there's enough unique elements to it, especially the female vocals, that really do make it stand out and sound better compared to many of the others in the style. Some stand out a lot more than Madness, others don't. Like I said, at first I didn't even like this. As time went on, it did get better. I'm still trying to figure out whether the fact that it has a female vocalist is weighing in on the decision as to why I like it so much. And it's not the simple fact that there is a female vocalist doing something different than gothic rock. And this isn't another Lullacry or another Evanescence. This is straightforward, melancholic, depressive black metal and shoegaze mixed together. And I liked it. I liked it with the female vocals once I figured out it was a female vocalist. Because again, at first I didn't like it, but that high-pitched shriek, for this style, it sounds so right when done right. Because there are times where it just goes way overboard with the enthusiasm. But overall, the songs sound great. They can be a bit hollow. It's an impressive performance on every song, either way. Just, again, Coming Home was just too much. It ends up being way too much. Definitely room to grow. It's obvious, like I said, they formed last year, and this is their not self-release, this is their debut album. There definitely is room to grow, and it definitely shows on the album. Again, a better production quality would have worked. A few tweaks here and there would have made this a stronger, richer, fantastic offering. Just based on the music itself, it sounds like it could be pushing an 8.5. I just wish there were more effects on the vocals to push them in the background. I wish the bass was a little richer, a little more prominent in the mix to make the music itself richer. I gotta give it a 7 out of 10. I mean, it's not a typical release. As I said, it has unique enough elements to it that really work in its favor, but it's just not that emotional at times. With a few more finishing touches, this would have been a great album. And this is a very impressive debut, either way. Dreariness is definitely a band that fans of either shoegaze-inspired black metal, or depressive metal, or even both, are definitely going to have to check out. And not just check out, but also keep on the radar for future albums. And given the time that this band formed to the time this album was created, that was a little more than a year. So, can I expect another album in a year? No. I can't really expect another album in a year. I can't even picture it being any better than this. But if the band were to take 2 more years and fine-tune their style, hone it down, and get a better production quality to it, really look at some of the elements that make Depressive Black Metal so great. Or do something more with the vocals. Maybe tone them down just a little bit, especially Enthusiasm. They can really put out something impressive, and I'm anxious to hear their next effort whenever that happens to come out. So, Dreariness. Keep your eyes on these guys. Go check them out. You'll enjoy it.